Welcome everyone to our Ask Them webinar. Good evening, this is Claudia Williams. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm a program officer at Washington Area Women's Foundation. We are a foundation supported by people like you, and we invest in women and girls of color because we know they make change happen. We created the Ask series so you could hear directly from leaders who are building a world where women and girls of color can thrive. Today, we have Rebecca York and Maisha Imam with us. They are both Rock Star Awardees. They won the award last year, and they will be sharing with us more about their projects and their work. So you know the Rockstar Fund is one of my favorite bodies of work at the Women's Foundation, mostly because it goes beyond traditional philanthropy. On one end of the grant-making process, we have the Youth Advisory Board of the DC Girls Coalition, selecting the awardees and reviewing the applications. And on the other, we have young people with dreams of improving their community, receiving awards to make them a reality. We are very grateful with Boeing for being one of the core supporters of the Rockstar Fund. We are so happy that they are supporting this work, and they are great in believing in the power of youth of color to ignite social change, and for partnering with us at the Women's Foundation. Without their support, we would not be able to be doing this innovative work. Today, I want to invite you to join the conversation in social media using the hashtag AskHerSeries and Boeing Inspires, and also tagging the Women's Foundation and Boeing in your tweets. We will also love to hear from you, so please feel free to drop your questions and answers in the question. Please drop your questions on the Q&A box, and we will get back to them at the end of this panel. So without much further ado, I would like to welcome Rebecca and Maisha. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me as well. It's such an honor.
To start, I was wondering if you could share a little bit about yourselves.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. My name is Rebecca York. I use she and they pronouns, and I am a professional diversity, equity, inclusion consultant, essentially. And I provide cultural competency trainings for individuals looking to learn more about LGBTQ identity. And I've been doing this work for my whole career, essentially, such as it is, but with many different crowds. So I originally started with youth and youth serving professionals, and now I work with primarily adults. But my work with Rockstar was focused on youth and youth education. And I'm thrilled to be here talking about it today.
Thanks for starting us off, Rebecca. The work you do seems so amazing. And so I'll go ahead and talk about myself. So I'm originally from Georgia, but I moved to DC summer of 2018. I started off with my career on Capitol Hill, but now I've ventured off. Now I'm at a law firm in downtown DC. But outside of my professional career is really where the Rockstar Fund comes into play, because I am the co-founder and president of the DC chapter of the Muslim Women's Professional Network. So we have a mission to focus on engaging and empowering Muslim women. We are a national 501c3 nonprofit. We have chapters in St. Louis, in Atlanta, in now New York and Philly and New Jersey. And I was the one who started our nonprofit chapter in 2019. So we are fairly new, but within 1 year, we had over 1,000 members. So it's really nice to hit the ground running. And with the Rockstar Fund, we are basically propelling and launching a mentorship program. And so it's really exciting to see, what other people have done with their grants, but it's been really, really such an honor. I'm just glad to be here.
You're both so talented, so I am so glad that the Women's Foundation is supporting your growth and your leadership. I'm sure everyone watching at home is more interested and curious to learn more about your project. So I was wondering if you can share, you talked a little bit about what you're doing, but if you can expand on that and also share, why did you come up with this idea? Maisha, let me know if you want to go first.
Yes, I can go first this time. So I really felt as though there was a need in the community. I was on the job hunt when I first got here. And it was really difficult because I feel like a lot of other groups have their own sort of mentorship programs or associations to draw, inspiration from. But we, when I first got here, it was very much a solo adventure, solo journey. And it would have been really nice to have, people to mentor me. And so there's just definitely a need in the community. I was able to find my own employment, but now that I've been privileged enough to do that, I feel as though it's my mission to pay it forward. And so that's basically how I got my idea. And locals in the area have told me too that this has been something that's been much needed for such a long time. And so it's just really great to see that, we can bridge the gaps in these resources. And that's also why our nonprofit started in the first place. It started with young Muslim women in college, pulling their resources together to make sure that everyone has a mentor that they can learn from, no matter wherever they end up.
That sounds like an incredible project, and I certainly know that I had friends growing up who would have loved to have that as a resource as we were moving up through school and then starting to look for internships and career planning. So my project is Unpack Education, and it was I created it because I have been in youth organizing spaces for most of my life, and I'm only now just facing the point where I will age out of this youth category. And I have a relatively unique background in that I am a transracial, transnational adoptee. I am also queer, and I came out in high school. And through that process, I think I and many other queer young people were catapulted into having conversations about identity much faster than many of our peers. Our identity formation was such that we had to start addressing it earlier on than some other folks. So I have always had the burden and privilege to have difficult conversations with adults and with colleagues and peers and classmates and all of that for most of my life. And as I transitioned into doing youth work, and then as I transitioned into training adults and working closely with adults and youth serving professionals, it became apparent that young people aren't necessarily being equipped to have these difficult conversations in ways that will reach the people they're talking to. We're well equipped to talk to one another about these things, but when adults place the burden of having these conversations onto young people, we then have to talk to our teachers, our mentors, our parents, our extended family about race, about class, about gender, sexuality, religion, all of these incredibly complex things that adults, quite frankly, don't necessarily have the tools to tackle. But young people really want to, and we've seen that over the last few years, and we've seen a very steady increase in youth organizing across the country and globally. And more young people wanted to get involved. And so I created Unpack to really start teaching young people the fundamental skills, the foundational skills to launch their organizing careers, whatever that will look like in the future. How do you read a room? How do you start facilitating conversations informally with peers, with family members? And then how do you take that to the next level and start advocating beyond your immediate networks?
To the core, both of your projects are about providing young people with the tools they need to grow professionally and personally. I can hear from what you were sharing that you were very inspired on your own lived experience. So I would love to hear more about what sparked your interest in applying, and what did you think when you were awarded this opportunity to do one project a reality? Rebecca, please feel to go.
Okay. So yes, I actually had a colleague at the time, Addison Moore, who was a previous Rock Star Awardee, and we worked very closely on our youth programs at the time. And Addison was always talking about Washington Area Women's Foundation, and as soon as applications opened, they came into my office and were like, "Hey, you got to apply to this. It's a great opportunity." So I, having of course been familiar and met with Claudia once or twice previously, I decided that it was a really good time for me to start branching out on my own, and also that what an amazing opportunity to have the funds to actually turn one of these kind of ideas that you brainstorm on your lunch break into a fully fledged idea that actually has legs and has the support to really get it off the ground.
Yes, my friend Aruna Tour actually forwarded it to me. And it's funny because we were posting it as an opportunity on our page because that's what we do. We try to, amplify as many opportunities as possible. And so while I do believe a lot of our members could have qualified for this, I saw it and she thought of me. She was like, Maisha, like this would be perfect for you to apply to. And like you've had this idea for so long, like why not? Gain some resources to help make that come to fruition. And so if it wasn't for her like little nudge in the right direction, I don't know where I would be right now. But I think that really helped me build up the confidence to fill out the application and, really have my idea on paper.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad that you applied. Definitely, your projects are amazing, and we are very excited to be supporting that. Rebecca, you talked about your facilitation tool so young people can have easier conversations when they face racism and other types of discrimination. And Maisha, you are supporting Muslim women in the workplace where they can also face discrimination sometimes. And it's hard, as you were mentioning, many other people with other identities have different opportunities and networks where they can lean, but you didn't see that for Muslim women. So I would love to hear how working on your Rockstar project has changed your perspective on racial justice and also gender equity.
I can go ahead and start. I was going to say basically that, there's much work to be done, obviously, but I think the Rockstar Fund has allowed this to be a tangible step in the right direction. It may be, incremental step, but I think we're making gains towards, a more equitable society where people have heard of us and people know how to bridge the gaps of their, career development and their career paths. And so I think this really takes a village. We really do need to make these partnerships and reach out to other organizations. And I'm glad that the Washington Area Women's Foundation, sees us as a part of their entity because it really takes the two of us together to make this happen. And so I'm really just grateful that, yeah, the Rockstar Fund really makes it more of it makes my dream turn into reality. Like you said, like, I think it really just makes it seem much more of a reality at the end of the day. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, I echo what Maisha said, but I think in terms of shifting the way I think about racial and gender justice, I wouldn't so much say that my perspective has shifted. I think I have always, I mean, I studied women's studies and gender studies in school with a very like queer of color focus, and since I was starting to think about race and gender, I think I've always leaned towards the frameworks of racial justice and gender justice. I think one thing that the Rockstar Project work did do is reinforce the method that we need to approach racial justice and gender justice with, and specifically reinforced my very strong belief, even now that I'm not in youth work, that young people need to be driving these conversations, and that there is so much what we would in the field call adultism in the world that young people trying to do the work are running into day after day after day from everyone, again, from their family, their colleagues, their peers. And it is that barrier that is preventing us from being able to create the change that we need. It's the adults' inability to view young people as they come, however they are, as if not equals, although they should be seen as equals, then as individuals with their own thoughts and their own beliefs that deserve and require respect in their own right. And so I think by creating resources tailored to young people that say you don't need to change yourself to reach adults, but what you do need to do is understand that there's strategy to approaching people who think differently than you. That framework shift, I think, is crucial, and that is something that this project really allowed me to dig into.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. As we were talking at the beginning, for both of you, it was a good opportunity that you actually had the funds and the time to develop your ideas. So I was wondering, what would you say to other donors? What advice would you say to donors and other foundations that want to invest in youth of color, but they don't know yet how to do it? What would be your advice?
So I can jump in, but my advice would really be to, if you want to invest in young people, you have to provide the young people the support they need. If you're looking to receive grant work that is at the same caliber as a college educated person who's 5 years out of school, then you're going to need to provide that young person the tools and support and structure that they need to achieve that. Young people are perfectly capable, but they need certain access tools in ways that I think often are overlooked or taken for granted, and then it's the young people's fault when they fall through or when they don't meet a deadline or don't phrase things the right way. And I think that's something that the Rock Star Fund really did well, and I think is leading in that respect.
Yes, I believe that donors should listen to people's stories. I think that's where, the magic happens. I think that's where, even if you've never lived the life that they have lived, you can put yourself in people's shoes if you just hear them out, and people want to be heard, especially young people. And I think that's where, you can start to get creative. It's more than just throwing money at an issue or, building capital. It's that social support and that storytelling that I think that really makes people get excited about doing these things and like pushing them through to the end.
At the Women's Foundation, we are investing in youth of color. So what you were mentioning really made me think of my next question. You are saying that young people require supports and actually frame the award in a way that they can follow through. And we in philanthropy talk a lot about centering the lived experience and the needs of young people. So you started already answering this question, but I was wondering, how do we do that? From your perspective, how can philanthropy actually center the needs and the lived experiences of youth rather than just creating programs that come from the top to down?
Yes, I can go ahead and answer. If there is an opportunity to, shine light on someone, a certain type of group of people, and, have their voice be heard, think who is missing from this room. And I think that helps answer that question. I think you need to think about, think outside the box, and it can be uncomfortable, but think about people who are missing in your lives, because oftentimes I think we do stick to the kind of people we know and like what's familiar and what's comfortable. But I think if we are to do outreach and just reach out to people that you normally wouldn't speak to, I think that is an opportunity to have people's voices be heard.
I think that's exactly right. Really doing that work of looking at who's here and who's not, and making that obvious. Another thing, or a few other things that I often talk about in trainings, talking about allyship and how do you actually start putting this into practice, is understanding that you're going to mess up, and so it really doesn't matter how you mess up. It matters how you correct yourself. How do you course correct, and do you course correct in a way that acknowledges the mistake and doesn't center your own feelings or your own experiences? And in the perspective of organizations, do you course correct and say, oh, I hear that feedback. I hear that we're getting it from a lot of angles, that we're actually not reaching the target demographic. We see it in our data results. We see it in community testimony. And then do you say, instead of, but we're doing everything we can and we hired an external consultant who works with young people in these areas that we're trying to target, do you actually say, okay, I see what we're doing wrong, and can I hire you community members who spoke up about this and pay you for your time and get your input on how we can be doing outreach better? Because it really is, without that perspective in the room, you're never gonna to get the expertise that you need to reach the folks. But again, it's hard to find those people to begin with. So make the opportunity available. Don't be worried about doing it perfectly first time around. Just be willing to adjust as much as you can within the parameters that you have.
That's definitely great advice, Rebecca and Maisha. We will take that into consideration. You know, I was thinking of myself when I was young, and I think that, not such a long time ago, but I think that it's such a difficult time. We have so many competing priorities in our lives, and we know that youth are really building the future, and youth need to be in our decision-making tables. But I was wondering if you could share with us, what advice would you give to other youth that are interested in empowering and improving their communities, as especially you who have done this project during a pandemic, during these difficult times? How can we support other young people, and how can young people be more engaged?
I can jump in. I think, as you said, we are in a time when there are so many issues coming to light, and we are, I think, all so activated to want to act, to want to dive into these conversations and continue to learn more. I think something that I know I struggled with and still struggle with is the idea that I have to do it. I have to do whatever I'm going to do to improve my community. And then I have to end up on a panel like this, or I have to achieve some goal that's relatively visible, that kind of mirrors what I see of other peers who maybe have made it to more famous, influential heights than myself. And I think that is one of the downfalls of our kind of social media age, is that ability to so readily compare yourself. And something I'd like to remind all of the young people who may or may not watch this is that community organizing at its core is not about visibility. It's not about being the person that's known in that very prominent, I'm the one with the bullhorn at the front of the crowd way. Community organizing and social justice work is really about the individual conversations we're having, the way that you choose to lead by example, the way that you choose to move through the world with intention and learn your history and ground yourself in a more radical understanding of US history and global history, and how power and privilege sit and operate. So it's not that necessarily external, big, flashy stuff all the time. It is more often than not a lot of grunt work that you won't get recognized for, but you will be greatly appreciated for.
Yes, no, I definitely agree with that. It's really about the small victories more so. And, you have to celebrate those small wins. And a lot of this work is behind the scenes. People don't get to see the good and the bad all the time, thanks to social media. But I think one piece of advice I would give is, don't be afraid to reach out to others. I think there's a lot of, anxiety and being like, oh, like they'll never hear me out. They won't respond to my message, whatever it may be. But I think, I wouldn't be doing this work if it weren't for those types of people who did respond to my messages. And especially in a place like DC, a lot of people do like to talk about themselves. And so, people want to, share their stories. And, I think that's really where you can draw inspiration from, just hearing people out and just learning from where they got to their place, where did they start and where did they end? And, they're still doing the work. And so I think just going out there and putting yourself out there and being vulnerable, I think that's where you can make progress. So whether that be on social media, on like LinkedIn, on Instagram, whatever it is, I guess pre-COVID, we would walk up to people, but now it's like with COVID, it's almost easier to reach out to others. I mean, I know we have Zoom fatigue, but it's almost more welcome to have a phone call or a video chat because people do crave that communication piece. So that's my piece of advice.
That's definitely great advice, even for adults. I am taking notes of all of what you were saying, definitely putting that into action. Talking about youth that are changing their communities, I know that the youth of the DC Girls Coalition has been very vocal about the type of supports that they need during these unprecedented times and how can we support youth during COVID. They did a virtual town hall last year, and they were talking about all of the mental health support they needed, the support they needed in schooling, and also being in their homes all of the time. So I was wondering, what do you think is the role of youth during these times of COVID, and how can we also support youth to improve and to come out of this pandemic stronger than before?
So I think the role of youth is being the light of creativity. I think that's where the youth have really come in strong during COVID, especially with things like TikTok. Like, I think that's been something like not only to help pass the time, but also was able to help with like politics or with social justice issues, raising like really big, I guess, really heavy topics to light and like having people be more aware about certain issues. I think that was a medium that was really creatively used by the youth. And so I think it's just an interesting time to be young because I think people, they want to, while people have ample time, they're not necessarily going commuting to school anymore. You're kind of losing the whole idea of like a cohort in school. Like now you can reach out to people virtually. And so I think the youth have become really creative in socializing on the internet and making, social justice issues come to light in a more creative way. Cause you have to build community that way and also have to fight the algorithm. It's not just about the most likes, but I think it's really the creativity that's powering through these Instagram accounts. I think the youth have been really good at doing that.
I agree completely. We could all take a page out of their book in terms of strategy for how to play the system, really, to signal boost the work. I really have nothing to add to that answer except kind of from a more zoomed out perspective. I do worry about placing too much of the burden on young people to emerge from the pandemic unscathed and to pull us along with them. I think I did sit on DC Girls Coalition for a while, and through my other experience in youth serving spaces, there can be a kind of default setting of, oh, we'll let the youth figure it out and we'll just follow their lead, which I think takes for granted or ignores completely the fact that they're still young people and still do need support and guidance. And we know that there are factors, biologically speaking, like my brain is still not fully developed. That is still a work in progress. And so, yes, we want this to be youth driven. Yes, young people are going to be the change, but that doesn't mean that adults have no part to play in this. And I think that is something I would urge adults to do now, because I know adults are burnt out to the core, and youth serving professionals are also parents and caregivers and all of these other things. But knowing that young people 100% are the change, and that we need to be there with the structural supports to make sure that they're mentally safe, they're emotionally safe, they still have housing, they still have food access, they still have internet access, because now that is an incredibly challenging thing. Yeah, I think that would be my thought on that.
I'm so glad that you mentioned the important role that adults play in letting youth lead. And it's not about is going to figure it out, but actually providing the supports. At the Women's Foundation, we have the Young Women's Initiative. The Rock Star Fund is part of the Young Women's Initiative. And we are investing in organizations that are building these youth voice and leadership so they can actually have the resources and the skills they need to advocate for the solutions that they want to see. So it's not about youth, it's going to figure it out, but investing in them and also paying them for their time and their expertise and really valuing what they have to bring to the table. We are also supporting coalitions and organizations that are advocating for policies and practices that, as we were talking before, are really centering the needs and the lived experiences of young women of color and gender expansive youth of color. This is a work that is so important for us, and we want to expand it in the future. So we'll see how much can we do that. I wanted to wrap up this part of the conversation just asking, what do you have coming up next and how can we support you? Not only us at the Women's Foundation, but everyone who's watching at home.
I can jump in and make it quick. Right now, my focus is very much supporting my family. We have a few health issues going on in family, so my focus is really there. So I don't have anything coming up, but I do look forward to really digging back into this work when I have capacity, and I'm really excited to see how it grows as we slowly inch towards reopening.
Wishing you the best of luck with that, Rebecca. I know how hard that can be. So all the power to you. For my organization, we do have a couple of upcoming events, a couple networking virtual events if you're interested in attending. If you follow our social media, if you know of anyone who'd be interested in becoming a member or even, serving in a volunteer basis, like that would be also appreciated. Any allies who want to, partner together and learn from each other. I think that's something that I would definitely be needing in the future. We haven't worked with every single type of group yet, and so I think if we can just take the time and take the energy to just learn from each other, it doesn't have to be too serious of a commitment. We don't have to start an initiative together or have an event together, but I think just even having a conversation, I think will be really exciting. So that's a great way to help support me. But other than that, I think, just following our social media is it's a great small step. Even if you don't like anything, that's fine. But just little things like that would be great.
Well, I'm really happy to now continue the conversation with some questions from the audience. We have some questions that I'll read, and the first one is for Rebecca. Donna is asking, have you found that you sometimes have to teach youth how to move forward in spite of the adults in their lives? Or do you counsel that it's worth continuing to push through persistent skepticism to get adult buy-in?
That's a really great question, and my answer is both. Depending on the situation, there are some young people who adults have failed and have not equipped to exist in the way that adults would like the young person to exist. And in those situations, it is a move on in spite of. And how can you, using the tools that you have, now adapt and continue your own journey and continue to adjust to whatever new environments you're in. And then there are young people who have not been in necessarily quite as difficult situations and are perhaps better equipped with coping skills, emotional skills that would allow them to push through and move towards adult buy-in. And not every youth needs to do that work, but there are some youth for whom it might be a skill they've already needed to develop for whatever reason. And for those young people, then yes, it really does become about strategizing, not using that language, but hey, how can you reframe that to get what you need out of the situation, which is for so-and-so to acknowledge your pronouns, or for so-and-so to acknowledge that Black Lives Matter, or whatever it might be.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. The next question is for both of you. As young people, what does self-care look like for you, especially during your work and in the pandemic?
I can take this. I would say being very compassionate with yourself is really important. You know, taking breaks throughout the day, and it's okay to say no. I think that's something I've struggled with personally, but you know, it's a journey and you have to take things day by day, really and truly. And in my planner, I always like to have something to look forward to. You know, each day, just something, it can be something small, it can be something big, but I think just treating yourself like how you would treat others. I mean, I love how it's like usually the other way around. It's like treat others how you'd like to be treated, but I think it has to be the other way around sometimes, especially when you're in these fields. I think we sometimes forget ourselves at the end of the day. So I think just taking that time, you know, you can like siphon off some time in your day, like, okay, for this hour, I'm just not going to be on my phone. I'm not going to be on my laptop or anything, like no screen time. Just going to listen to music, take a walk, whatever that looks like for you. I think that's really important.
I would echo all of that. And ironically enough, before COVID, I was giving trainings on well-being and healthy living and all of that. I'd give about one a month, and I had not been taking any of my own advice. So as of the pandemic, I have gotten the opportunity, using a growth mindset here, to slow down and to actually hone in on what will reduce my stress, what will allow me to continue to function in the ways that I need to.
We have another question here. If you had unlimited funds, what else would you do with your project? And this is a question for both of you.
Oh, wow. If I had unlimited funds, I mean, dream big, right? I feel like there could be a fully built out training program for young people that could subsidize cost in case they had to miss work or anything like that, and really allow young people the same learning opportunities as adult peers have. So I'm thinking Rockwood Leadership, something akin to that, dedicated training programs, but that would focus on developing youth activists.
I really like this question because I've never really thought like that, but I mean, it's important to dream big, right? And I think at the end of the day, our goal is to have, you know, something like this available in every major city, hopefully, you know, in the States and hopefully on a global level. But I think that would be great. And also to have this be, you know, my full-time career would be amazing. This is just what I do out of my own free time, limited free time. And also the people on my board and like across the board in other chapters, if this was a paid position, I think we would have a lot more talent. Being able to commit fully to this would be great. Not just for me, but I think for others as well, and have this be a sustainable thing where people, you know, there's not as much turnover and that people can really just fully commit to this, and have like, you know, an internship program across the board, having scholarship programs across the board. I think those are three things I could think of off the top of my head. Yeah, just having like actual physical offices would be great. Even if we're not in person right now, I think just having like, you know, hopefully once we're all vaccinated, just having somewhere to meet, I think it would be really nice because we've never had that. But yeah, I think having mentorship, scholarship programs, and paid positions would be at the top of my list.
Maisha, I was thinking as you were speaking, what are the programs that you currently offer at the network?
Yeah, so it's dependent upon each chapter. Our chapter right now has the mentorship program. We do have an intern right now, but we could only have one intern at this time. We also have other initiatives, like we're working on towards having a mental health initiative in the community. We're also going to have community service for the month of Ramadan, which is coming up next month. And this is all like kind of, it depends month to month, but we basically have monthly events as well. So we have 2 networking events this month that y'all can RSVP to and register for. I'm trying to think of what else from the top of my head, but I think right now the biggest thing of our group is that we're always posting job opportunities and networking opportunities on our Facebook group and our Instagram page. And I think that's what really has people coming together. But we're looking forward to having more community events as well. But I think that's where the mental health and the community service initiatives will come into play.
That sounds excellent. We have another question here. Rebecca, you were talking about youth organizing before, and it's not all about being on social media or really having these really great opportunities to be in positions of leadership. Could you talk about some of the challenges that youth are facing when they do community organizing?
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges is access, because oftentimes adult spaces don't allow young people to enter at the capacity that they would like to. And so young people are often having to build their own systems to do the same work. And now that's not always a problem. Sometimes it is more effective in meeting their goals, but it is also inefficient, and it's also denying a young person an opportunity to find a mentor, to find a broader community that's available to them. Now, when we're thinking about digital organizing, that is a completely different space in which young people are definitely dominating and definitely pushing the limits of what is possible and what efficient organizing is. So I think, again, it really depends, but adults preventing access is certainly the biggest barrier.
Wow, I think those are all of the questions that all of our panelists have, that our audience has right now. I was wondering before wrapping up, if you could share one highlight or something else that you think the audience really needs to get before wrapping up from your conversation today.
Do you want me to step in and give you a second? I think the takeaway, and especially for those of us who are swimming in or engaging in some way social justice issues, is to understand that those issues are not dissociated from youth issues. And a lot of the barriers that we place on young people, that they don't talk right, that they don't necessarily have the skills needed to complete the job. There's a lot of coded language that adults use to judge young people's ability that aligns very closely with work with language that is used to bar people of color, to bar disabled folks, neurodivergent folks, to bar LGBTQ folks, to bar women from seats of power, whatever that looks like, and to understand that to really be dedicated to looking at our own bias, unpacking that, changing our behavior, is to apply those same principles to young people when we work with them.
I really like what you said, Rebecca. I want to echo all of that. And I do want to say also that I think, right, it's all about building power. And I think it's more than just, we're just putting on an event, a one-time event. I think this is really the start of, or the continuation rather, of us trying to build constant power and power for, sustainable power for future generations. So I think while it seems like just attending an event is just one thing that happens one night, it can actually be something very meaningful, because you could meet someone there that could change your career, or you could change their career. I mean, who knows what might happen. And so I think we do kind of miss that spark in a pre-COVID time. We would easily be able to meet people, but I think, you know, it's okay to take that risk and just attend an event and see what happens, you know, even if you've never heard of the organization before, or, you know, bring a friend with you if you'd like, you know, just have them tune in. I think, you know, it doesn't hurt to try. And I think a lot of times people have that Zoom fatigue, but, you know, sometimes it's good to just push through. And so if you can just, you know, make an exception for one event, you know, try to make it happen, because I think you won't regret it. So that's the main takeaway, I would say.
Thank you so much. We have one final question that I want to ask before wrapping up. So what is the challenge that young people have to engage with mentors or with remote learning with the COVID pandemic happening? Have you both worked with young people? What are your thoughts on this? And you are young yourselves.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take this. I think the issue with engagement for young folks is that it's very easy to tune out and not remember everything. And so something that I've done personally is just make sure you always have notes taken. You know, whenever there's a meeting or an event, just jot down some notes. And if you ever have some other, you know, the next day, review the notes and see what you've learned from it. Even now, I think I jotted a couple notes for this panel, and just trying to remember everything, because it's very easy to just do something and then forget it the next day. And, you know, it's also, you know, a great way to journal, like, you know, for young people to remember, okay, this is what I did last week. This is how I'm going to reach my goal next week. You know, I think it's just a day by day, week by week sort of thing. So I think that's my key to maintaining the connection, and also maintaining, I guess, allowing them to remember the retention of what they're learning.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I'd certainly have taken to journaling a lot more during the pandemic. When schools first went virtual, I was working with elementary schoolers, essentially that age group. And something that I found with those folks, and then with some of the middle schoolers, was that the remote learning actually, for many of them, and again, I was working with LGBTQ youth, the remote learning was a relief for them. They didn't have to worry about how they were expressing their gender in school. They didn't have to worry about feeling that the same isolation socially that they would feel were they to go in. And so for young people like LGBTQ youth, who again have higher rates of mental health issues, have higher rates of social anxiety and things like that, it actually has been a great reprieve. Not that it has been rose-colored all across the board by any means, but there have been some upsides. And I think something to also consider on top of everything Maisha said is how are we going to transition these young people back into school successfully, especially for those who have learning disabilities, especially for those who were prone to feeling isolated beforehand. I imagine things will only be worse when young folks are all back in school and really excited to see one another again.
Thank you so much for your time today. We had a wonderful conversation with you. I really enjoy listening to your insights, and I'm really proud of you both and the work that you are doing. And I can't wait to see what you will do in the future. I want to wrap up the panel just highlighting a couple of things that you mentioned today. First, that youth really have the ideas that they really have ideas to solve the problems that they are facing, but that they need support to actually make them a reality. And that the philanthropic and social sector, really, we are in a unique position where we can provide this support, not only by funding organizations that work with youth, but also by funding youth directly. And there's a lot of space to reach out to youth serving organizations so that youth can learn about these opportunities. For example, where Maisha was talking about really the networking that her organization is working on, so youth can learn more about this. And then finally, that engaging with youth authentically means respecting their time, respecting their unique leadership, and also recognizing their lived experience as unique and invaluable. I'm really grateful for the time that you spent with us today. We are very grateful with Boeing for the support to the Rockstar Fund, and also for believing in youth and investing in youth. And we will continue doing conversations, so please feel free to stay tuned. Sign up to our newsletter so you can know what's going on with us at the Women's Foundation. And also please visit our website so you can learn more about our work, and you can also donate and support our work. Thank you so much for everyone for your time today. I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.